Well, I'm sound asleep when the alarm goes off. This annoying alarm that wakes me up. It's 6:30 in the morning. I'm in Las Vegas on a solo trip. Now, 6:30 in the morning is normally fine, but I just went to bed about 4.5, 5 hours ago. I was on a rafting trip, and some of the people that I met on that rafting trip I hung out with last night. The conversation was flowing, the wine was flowing, and there's no clocks in these casinos, so I lost track of time. Now I gotta hurry up, get out of bed, my head hurts, I gotta get to the Tropicana because I'm gonna go skydiving. Now, scheduling a skydiving session at 6:30 in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning seemed like a good idea at the time, but I'm regretting it now. So I try to hop on a bus from the Riviera to the Tropicana. I gotta go through the whole strip here. But I finally get there, and I meet some new people. There's a guy there from Costa Rica, whose name I forget. Really cool guy. We have a lot of things in common. He's going skydiving for the first time. I'm going skydiving for the first time. He's on a solo trip to Las Vegas. I'm on a solo trip to Las Vegas. So we strike up this conversation, and pretty soon these waivers come out that we're supposed to sign. And as you can imagine, for skydiving, they're quite thick. So I start reading mine, and it's humbling, seeing all the different ways that you can die and get injured, and how they're not going to take any responsibility for it. So it's taken me a while. I look over at my new Costa Rican friend, and he's going through the pages as fast as he can, signing his initials on every single page, signing the end. He's done. He's done in about 15 seconds. And I asked him, "What's going on? Why aren't you reading that?" And he says, 1, I want to go skydiving. 2, they don't let you go skydiving if you don't sign. 3, I don't want to know what it says. All right, so let's talk a little bit about risk. Find out more right after this. Hey, it's Derek Hagan. I'm a financial therapist and financial life planner, coming to you with another Money Health presentation where we're going to talk about how to think about risk. Now, risk is effectively the idea that bad stuff can happen. Okay, that's it. Like, bad stuff will happen. That's the risk. It could be anything. But you can think of it like this. You can think of it like you've got something in mind that you want to do. Something in mind that you're thinking of. That you would call that expected result. It could be, I expect to go get my mail from the mailbox. Or, I expect to drive to the restaurant. Or, I expect to get 7% return in the stock market. Or, I expect to go for a run. Now, those are fine expectations to have. And most of the time, almost all of the time, that stuff is going to happen. But there's a risk that it won't happen, or something bad will happen as you pursue that result. My expected result of going to get the mail at the mailbox, I could slip on the ice. And that could be something kind of bad, like I just fall down and get embarrassed. It could be really bad, like I break a wrist. Or my expected result of driving to the restaurant could end up in me getting into a car crash. My expected result of going for a run could end up with me twisting my ankle. My expected result of trying to get 7% returns in the stock market could end up with me getting less than that. Okay, so risk is effectively the idea that something bad might happen. And there's 2 elements of risk that I want to make sure that we think about here. The first is kind of, I would say, the more common version. How likely is it to happen? How likely is it that the risk is going to show up? You might talk in terms of probability, even though technically probability and likelihood are different. We can think of them the same. So if there's something that you know is going to happen, or it's very likely that it's going to happen, we would call that riskier. Or if there's something you'd be super surprised if it happened, it's nearly impossible, we'd call that less risky. It might even, the further you get out on this side of the spectrum, you might not even think about all those things. There's an idea that risk is what's left over when you think you've thought of everything else. So you can think of some of the bad things that happen, but These ones we almost never think about. So those are less risky because it's probably never going to happen. So let's contextualize that. If I'm standing next to a cliff and I'm far away from the cliff, it's technically possible that I can fall down. I can fall off the cliff. But it's not as likely. Okay, so that would be less risky. On the other hand, if I'm right up on the cliff, I'm more likely to fall off the cliff. So this is more risky. Less risky, more risky, because the probability is different. Okay, less risk, less probability. More risk, more probability. The second thing that we have to consider is assume that the risk shows up. Whatever you can think of that's bad that's going to happen or could happen. Assume that it does. What are the consequences? How bad is it going to be if it happens? So if it's okay, you can deal with it. I fall and I get embarrassed. Oh yeah, that's pretty tolerable. So that would be less risky. But I die? That would be more risky. And so we have to consider both sides of risk. This looks like this. If this is only a 3.5 foot fall, and I fall off that cliff, that's okay. But if it's a 100-foot fall, that's probably not going to be okay. So it's good to think about these two elements of risk in a grid. Right? So how likely is it to happen? And if it does happen, how bad is it going to be? Okay. So if it's likely to happen and it's dangerous consequences, we call that stay away. Don't go there. Don't do that. That's a stupid risk. Don't do stupid risks. A stupid risk is something that doesn't have a payoff. You've taken the risk and it doesn't have a payoff. We only take risks when we expect to get rewarded. No, we'll learn more about that later. What if it's not likely to happen, but if it does, it's going to be fine because it's tolerable consequences? Well, you're probably going to be okay. Be prepared, of course. You know, they're tolerable things can happen, minor nuances and irritations. That's fine. What about these other quadrants, though? What about something that's likely to happen, but that's not so bad? Well, that's okay too. That's okay too because it's not that bad. Even though it's likely, you'll get over it. You might even learn something from it. But there's another quadrant here that we have to consider. Something that's very, very unlikely, but if it happens, it's dangerous, super dangerous consequences. In the financial world, we can cover these with insurance. Right, so it's very unlikely that my house is going to burn down, but if it does, I'm out of a house. So I can buy homeowner's insurance. I'm not likely to run my car through somebody's house, but if I do, I'm going to get sued for a lot of money. So I have liability insurance on my auto coverage. I'm not likely to break my arm, but if I do, it's going to be really expensive. So I have health insurance. So that's the whole idea here is we can get a bunch of people together and pay into it. That's premiums. Then, in the unlikely event that it happens, we take that pooled money and we give it to the person who had that bad thing happen. This doesn't cover non-financial consequences, though. So if these dangerous consequences are not financial, so it's not likely to happen, but if it happens, I can die. If it's not likely to happen, but if it happens, something really, really bad happens, now you really have to consider. So the non-financial risk, if it's dangerous, you might not want to take that risk, even if it's unlikely. Or be prepared. You know that this is a possibility, so be prepared. There better be an appropriate upside for that. Okay, now speaking of risk and reward are related. So in other words, you can't get any reward if you don't take any risk. Said another way, if you don't want to take any risk, you can't expect much reward. They're two sides of the same coin. They're effectively the same thing. So I can not take any risk, of getting in a car accident by never leaving my house. But I don't get any rewards in terms of leaving my house, right? Or I can take a lot of risk, say invest money into a startup company That's a lot of risk. But if it pays off, there's a lot of reward there. So making these things consciously and on purpose is the idea. This is what we're shooting for. So consider both sides of this risk. It's a great exercise to think through your life decisions and your financial decisions this way, and it will help you live a life that's more intentional.